Well, glad somebody showed up. Very happy to be here, and thank you so much for coming. I know it's late in a day that's been full of a lot of heavy lifting, and we want to be mindful of that. There are snacks if you need energy boost. We're going to get up and moving around here in a little bit to try to keep us from dozing off here this afternoon. My name is Jeff Hudson. I'm an English teacher and department chair at Alton High School in Alton, Illinois. And Leslie Funk is a colleague of mine there. She's a Spanish teacher at the high school. And we are also both, the work that we share with you today is, we're kind of the tip of the iceberg. We represent the work of a lot of people. You'll see on some of the handouts and on the overhead here that logo on the bottom right hand that says CoLab. That stands for Cultural Landscapes Collaboratory. And we have a website, ourcolab.org. I'll tell you more about the collab at the end of the session, but know that our work comes out of the collab. And in a nutshell, what the collab is it's a consortium of teacher researchers, teacher leaders, classroom teachers who inquire into practice, share practice, are answering good questions about how cultures, how professional development cultures are created and sustained. A lot of us have roots in the National Writing Project, and I'll share a little bit more about that as well. It's currently, the current hub, the center of gravity right now for the collab is the University of Missouri St. Louis. And they're about to launch a space that they're calling the Collabitat, which is, it's a physical space, but it's also a figurative one as well. That's going to include a thread of coursework in teacher leadership and in design. It provides professional development for school districts in the St. Louis metro area, and conducts summer institutes as well. And in part, what we want to share with you today is what that work looks like at Alton High School and how we're kind of changing what PLCs look like in our school. So to that end, or to get us started anyway, we want to play a game.
Yes. Yeah. Do you want to group everybody into,
yeah,
if you don't mind?
Yeah, let's make one big group so however it's easier. If you want to migrate. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think they stay as one big group the whole time, don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I can move all that stuff later.
Yeah, don't worry.
You can just grab your things. That'll be fine.
So here's the premise for the game. And to start, we need one person in the group. Leslie, are you going to play with them? I think you should.
Do you want me to play?
Sure.
Okay.
We need one person in the group to be an idea person. To be an idea person. And I'll explain what that means. It's totally painless. But we need one person to generate some ideas for us. And then I'll explain what and how that'll work. So we have that person. Nice.
Great.
All right, so here are the ideas that we need. So this has been a wonderful conference. Tomorrow afternoon we'll all be tired and feeling good about what we've learned and what we shared. And we think that it would be smart to have some kind of celebration or party to celebrate the work of this. So your job here is to pitch ideas to your table as to what this celebration could look like. Okay, very simple. You can shoot them off rapid fire one at a time. Table, your job after Brenda shares her idea is to yes, but but we don't have any money. Yeah, but I'm going to be tired and I miss my kids. And you're going to but her idea. Okay, and we'll just do it for 30 seconds or so. Maybe an idea, a quick whip around of yes, but. And then if it comes back to you a second idea, I'm just going to yes, but Brenda's ideas. Okay? So Brenda, you're on. How do you think we should celebrate the end of our conference?
I think we should have a New Orleans second line. New Orleans second line. We all get to dance around the room, just celebrate the fact that we did all of this.
But I hate dancing.
Are we yes, buddy?
Yes, buddy.
Yeah, but I don't know how to dance.
Yeah, but we don't have any music.
You
Get your chance.
I know, let me think. Yes, but I worry that there won't be enough people to make it look good, feel good.
Yeah, I'm just too tired.
Yeah, somebody might get hurt.
Okay, no second line. All right. And I thought the second line was a winner. You know, I was like, hey, you know, celebrate good times, let's go home. You know, and it's just like, I knew half the table was lame, but I was running out of things. Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna do it one more time. You can use the same ideas if you want, or if you come up with another one. But this timetable, you're gonna yes and those ideas. Yes and whatever comes to mind. Okay? So again, you can use the same ones, or if you think of something new, and we're gonna do a round or two of yes and those ideas.
I think we should have New Orleans down second.
Yes, and we should have some jambalaya.
Yes, and I'll bring something to drink.
Yes, and we'll have a band.
Yes, and we should do it multiple times so we get better at it as we go.
Yes, and we should even stay till Saturday.
Especially if there's alcohol.
Yes, and invite some of these other stuffy conferences going on.
No, what's the right thing for that?
So, how was that different?
It was more fun.
Yes, and others at the table too. What was that? How was that different? Was it more fun?
Gave us better ideas to even add to it.
Yeah, the additive nature is
Yeah.
that's contributing.
We
And I, yes, and I was involved in what it was gonna be.
Oh, good. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Absolutely.
So we
Everyone.
can build on Brenda's
Mhm.
instead of tearing it down, instead of tearing it down.
I hope we're not putting too fine a point on it, but the yes anding yes by game does a few things for us. First of all, it's kind of fun and it gets people talking that maybe don't know each other. But more than that, it makes visible for me and Leslie anyway some things that we believe about our work and how we support teachers to grow and how we support new teachers to emerge as leaders within the school. And it's a kind of forward-thinking yes and or growth mindset that we really want to nurture in intentional ways. We can say we want that, but how do we do that? How do we support that? What does that look like in schools? And that's really kind of what we want to share with you today is how we've gone about doing that at our time. And we're going to engage you in a bit of that practice and show you what that looks like. So I think we're at a quick break.
Yes, we are. So what you'll find among all of the other things that are on your table is you should have a piece of lined paper. So we've provided a space for you because you are going to do a little bit of writing today, so this can be your space to write. And so as Jeff was saying, when we're talking about a growth mindset, we're going to kind of think about that in the terms of professional development. So I'm going to do a quick write. And what that means is we're just going to give you a few minutes to answer these two questions, this writing prompt that is up on the screen. So we want to think about professional development, and I want you to think about what have been your successful professional development experiences? Because we've all been through professional development. We're doing it right now, right? So there's good professional development, there's bad, there's ugly, it's all, it runs the gamut. So let's think about successful professional development. What have those experiences been like for you, and what has made them so? No right or wrong answer, just go ahead and put words on the paper. Jeff, how long are we giving them on the quick write?
3 to 5 minutes.
3 minutes,
somewhere
okay,
in
I'll
there.
check it in 3 minutes.
first thoughts to a close. Find a good place to pause. Ten or 15 seconds again. Don't stop yet, so we can get to a good stopping place. Okay. The directions next I'm going to give in a very specific and intentional way for a couple of reasons. A partner is one person, and so Leslie has sat with you so that we have an even number. And we'd like you to read what you've written right from the page to that person. No need to embellish or apologize or explain, just read the words that are on the page and then reciprocate and let your partner read what she has written. And then we'll try to scoop up some of that collective wisdom of what counts as quality PD. Okay, so off you go.
Discussing what we're learning, how we can use it in our classrooms, those were teacher generated consideration, perhaps iPads. Informal, friendly, teacher directed, school provides resources, student programs, further explains takeaway supplies, things to use, physical examples, and then they can take on students.
Being a school coach to train the teachers to be teacher leaders. I did at Cheryl and other coaches who were at different schools.
I just
Teachers
need to
and
see
teachers
about
to
them and I feel energized.
and how they were thinking
Yeah.
for improvement. I was serving each other, coaching. As the teams developed, we became co-leaders with those teachers. And then finally they led, and I just responded and graduated. And they said, what made them so was that the teacher leaders became independent.
I know what you're saying.
I'll just let you take over and I can just hang out and participate in my own professional development.
Funding, the access to experience and expertise as needed, and there was lots of collaboration.
And she was that really engaged. She made you feel.
So, we're going to make visible a couple. Oh, you're not done. I'm so sorry. No, please finish.
And the other was still coming. Champagne next year. Lots of new ideas, things we hadn't thought of. And it created possibility thinking.
Sorry, my list was really long, so.
No, thank you for stopping me. I'm glad you did. So I just want to kind of make visible what's happened so far and to name it. So with this simple prompt, we had you start in your own head. What as a person living in the world and with certain experiences and expertise in education, what counts for you as an individual for good quality PD? And then we let that trickle out to a partner and interact with someone sitting next to you. And what we want to do now is to try to make visible to the whole room that collective wisdom. So all of that is to invite you to share something you heard a neighbor say or something you wrote that matters to you as far as a good quality PD experience, and we'll try to capture some of that out here. So what did you have to say?
I said it was based on real need.
Real need. Can you say more about that? Based, I'm curious about two things.
So instead of it being brought in for some artificial statement, it was based on what the teachers believed they needed, and there might have even been data used to figure out what it is they needed.
Yes. The model that we all have grown up with as far as professional development, especially I think maybe as a result of No Child Left Behind, is that of some expert coming in, flying in for the day with some satchel full of magic bullets, and he throws away again, right? And he's there to fix you. There's something wrong. You're not doing it right, so I'm here to save you, right? As opposed to what I hear you talking about is something that's a bit more organic and grounded in what teachers feel like they need. Yeah, nice. Something else.
Brenda say immediately applicable.
Am I good? Practical. Yeah.
Val and I both mentioned like that we get a sense of energy from it, like we're energized
yeah, how many times have we left feeling drained, right? As opposed to that boost. Not to steal any of our thunder later, but after the PLC meetings that we have at our school, Leslie often talks about those are her best days. She feels the best facing her students after we do this kind of work together. Yeah, some other things.
Teacher-led, sorry.
Teacher-led. One of the. Oh, well, yeah, right. I mean, well, I mean, it's what this conference is all about, right? This idea of leadership and teacher-led. One of the tenets of the National Writing Project, which you may or may not know much about, is the idea of teachers teaching teachers, right? That's their mantra: teaching teachers, teachers teaching teachers, or professionals developing professionals, right? We know our practice best. Yes, absolutely.
So I have a quote I put into a presentation I'm doing next week, which is leaders don't create followers, they create
Other leaders, yeah.
And so one thing I would say about this is that it's effective if the teachers then become independent, so they can now lead you. So
Would you call
no
that
matter what it is that anybody said teachers were learning or whatever you were doing, it's that people leave feeling that independence to be able to implement or design or do whatever they're going to do without the mentor and leader, another mentor and leader.
I have a word, and I think it ties together some of what Leslie was saying and some of what Lynn is saying. And for me, the best quality PD should inspire, not just energize. Because energize, yes, this was great, you're good, but inspire takes it to another level where you actually do what Lynn says, where you're starting to do some things, or you heard something that encourages you to move forward. And it's not just, it was a lovely workshop, I got a lot of good notes, I'm putting this stuff on the shelf.
Right.
I want to argue, I'm going to add my own up here. The best PD that I've experienced has been collaborative. I've had opportunities to, and those kinds of experiences are the ones that inspire and energize me. If I have to sit and be talked at for however long, it's right. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, like active processing, so that there's not so much information that's just like get, but it's like, how are you going to use this in your classroom and give you time to look at the information and think about it, and also in multiple ways. So like maybe you have an article and then you also have an activity and you also have this other thing that's like hitting at the same concept.
I love the language you use to do that, active processing. It's a reflective process, that opportunity. Those are two words. If I wanted to, I'd have planted those words in there. I would hope people would say those things about good PD, right? And they're words that we hear in education a lot: collaborative, PLCs, right? All of that. I want to argue that they're in danger of being weasel words. We really don't know. We know what we mean when we say them, but everyone means something a little bit different when they say it, or it means some. Just because our school has collaborative time in the schedule doesn't mean that that's what happens in that time, right? It needs to be led. It needs to be intentional, and maybe this is the segue into the next piece. Let me put it here. The question. What counts as good PD is fairly easy to answer. This is a great, rich list. We all recognize that and are nodding our heads as we do that. A question for us as teacher leaders, in whatever capacity we serve, is how do we do this? How do I lead professional development that inspires and that allows teachers to grow, right? And one of the questions those are questions that we've been trying to answer. I've mentioned the National Writing Project a couple of times. Back in 2008, I became the director or co-director of a National Writing Project site at Edwardsville. What that means, even if you don't know anything about the National Writing Project, is that during the summer, we would bring teachers together, up to 30 teachers, for a month of very intense work in literacy pedagogy, in becoming writers themselves, in engaging scholarship and literature, all of that. Powerful transformative experience. When I first went through, I went back to graduate school in the momentum of that. I was inspired. I was lit. One of the sadnesses about a summer institute is that it ends, and you go back to a school whose culture is not that, right? And so one of the questions that we pick at is, how can that work continue? How can I create and sustain a community of learners, whether in my classroom with my kids or with my colleagues? How can I create that kind of professional development culture that does all these things that you all just named? And how can they be sustained? How can they continue? And when I say we, I mean my colleagues at UMSL and a group of teachers that have been doing this work for about 10 years now. We've identified what we call 3 durable practices. No matter what comes down the pipe, whether it's a new teacher evaluation model or a new curriculum mandate, whatever winds are blowing in the educational world, if we can enact these with some fidelity regularly and intentionally, we're going to get better. We're going to grow as teachers. And those durable practices you've named, we can scoop them up right here. Intentional collaboration, intentional reflection, and intentional instruction and disciplinary practice. And here's what we mean by that. If I'm a science teacher, I need to know what it is that scientists do. Whatever it is. If I say scientists jump up and down on one leg, then how am I intentionally teaching and supporting my students to jump up and down on one leg? And that's what I mean by disciplinary practice. How am I embedding those in my lesson? How am I supporting my students to do that? Right? And those 3 durable practices live in something called an IMP. There's nothing magical about that acronym or that language, and Leslie's going to lead us in an inquiry into her practice. Okay? An inquiry into my practice has 3 components. You're going to experience them here now. There's a pre-brief. We're going to invite you to eavesdrop in a professional conversation. I want you to pay attention to my role. I'm a thinking partner for her in this. We often, when we do this in our school, we enact this in teams of 3. There'll be a facilitator helping guide this. Leslie and I are going to play all 3 roles today for you. There's a pre-brief whose primary job is building of empathy. My job is to simply listen. She's going to lead us in a lesson. She's not going to tell you what she would do, or she's not going to hand you some magic worksheet. She's going to get her hands dirty in a piece of her practice, and then we're going to debrief that afterwards. Okay? And I'm going to point you to a handout here that's going to help you follow along what we do. You should have a sheet at your seat that looks like that. And you will hear in this pre-brief conversation some of this language. Explore, envision, and act along the left-hand side. This is space for you to jot any notes. Please don't feel like you have to transcribe our conversation. It's just a place for you to notice what's happening. And there are 3 basic phases to this, and you'll see how it works. And I'm going to invite Leslie up here now and invite you to eavesdrop on our conversation around her practice that she's going to share with us. Good?
Yep. Oh, I'm sorry.
So we're jotting into the
So, well, all 3. So the first question I'm going to ask her, you'll hear, we'll use the word explore, and and yep, you'll see as we go.
I hate to be disruptive.
No.
Jeff, what's your Twitter?
J Hudson 55.
Okay, thank you.
There was something I was going to say, and I didn't put it. Okay.
We'll come to you.
Yeah, I'm right. And with this worksheet that you're jotting notes on, there's no right or wrong way to do it. Like if we're not going to go, no, wait, don't put that there. So yeah, it's just to kind of help guide through the conversation. Okay.
Wait, well, thanks.
Thank
Ready?
you. Yes, I'm ready.
All right. Well, so the first question I have for you is, what is it that you feel you're exploring with this particular lesson, or a piece of lesson anyway? Because I know it's probably bigger in your classroom than 40 minutes or what do we have. But think of that question in 2 ways. What are you exploring in terms of content, but also what are you exploring in terms of your own pedagogy?
Okay, so today, content-wise, we're going to explore figurative language,
Okay.
and and poetry.
Okay.
So that's the content, very straightforward. And then as far as pedagogy is concerned, there are going to be 2 big pedagogical moves, I would say. First is rendering a text. We know that we just don't want to throw text in front of students and go, here, read this, and we'll talk about it later, sort of thing. So how do we intentionally, have students interact with the text? So text rendering, and also writing to learn. How can I set my students up to write creatively?
Okay, nice. I think those 2 things fit together well. Here's what I heard you say. Content-wise, we're exploring figurative language in poetry specifically. Figurative language in a poem. I suspect you didn't say it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
wait, can I guess and there?
Of course.
In the figurative language, I would like to specifically talk about metaphor.
Metaphor.
Yes.
Okay. And pedagogically, you said you were exploring 2 big things: the idea of rendering a text, making meaning with the text,
Right.
rather than just handing it out, saying, read this, right?
Right.
I particularly liked, I heard you say, how am I getting students to interact with the text, which is suggests something more than just read it, right?
Right.
And a way that you want to do that is, at least one way is through writing to learn, writing to make sense. So a text rendering, guiding a close read, and then writing to learn.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so how do you envision that unfolding? What's going to happen?
Okay, so throughout the lesson, there are going to be 5 big parts to the lesson. So the first part is my students are going to start off with a little bit of a quick write, just
Okay.
to kind of get us poised for the rest of the moves. So
Gotcha.
first part would be a quick write. The second part is we will be reading a poem and rendering that text. Then after that, there's going to be a real brief video clip about metaphor. After that, my hope is the students will be ready then to write their own metaphor. And after that, we're going to take a gallery walk to look at and appreciate the work that we've done.
Nice. So here's something I noticed listening to you talk. I heard you name 5 pieces: a quick write, reading of the poem, a video clip, writing our own, and then a gallery walk. Those were the big pieces. What was interesting to me listening to you talk is that they're really, maybe this is why we did this as circles, right? There was a real sense of, I'm doing this in order to be able to do this, in order to be able to do this. Like,
Yes.
I even heard you use the word poise. The quick write is going to poise us to do the next part.
Right.
Um,
That's very intentional. I don't just have 5 activities because I have 40 minutes to fill out, right? I need them to be sequential in that order. And having taught this lesson before, I've played with where to play that video clips. Is that an opener? Is it a closer? And it nestles nicely where it is, and I've played around with that. So that is very intentional that it is set up that way.
I hear a couple things in that. One, this idea of sequence is something you attend to. You're intentionally putting things where they are. And not only that, but I also heard you say that you've messed this order up and it's not always right there, and you're trying to figure out what the good sequence is.
Right. And so I feel pretty good about the sequence now. There is a component in that unfolding of this lesson. The rendering of text, this is the way that I'm going to do this today with everyone is completely different than how I've normally done it. So I've even tweaked this lesson, and now today I'm going to find out whether or not I like the tweaks. Exactly. So we'll see.
Once it's enacted, once we're done here, what do you hope they take away?
Well, a couple things. I definitely hope that they take away a deeper understanding of what metaphor is and what figurative language is and what purpose does it have? What does it help us do? I also hope that I know that they will take away a piece of writing that does not exist right now. So everyone will walk away with something that they've created that isn't in the world right now, but it will be in 45 minutes. So I know that they will take away that as well as students. Now, if they're wearing their teacher hats, I'm hoping that they'll take away my reflection on whether or not I like the tweaks.
Okay, sure. Okay, so I heard you say that we're going to leave with a deeper understanding of content, figurative language. I liked how you said what metaphor helps us do. I like how you said that. Also, we're going to have a piece of writing that doesn't exist. We're going to create something. And then pedagogically, or if we're wearing our teacher hats, you're hoping that we're reflecting on purpose a little bit, or specifically for you, you're thinking about the tweets you've made and maybe getting some feedback from them on how that worked.
Yes. Yeah. There was yes, and in my reflection on how we play around with a lesson to hopefully model to not be afraid to do that, because that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm kind of putting it out there that I don't really know how that part of the lesson is gonna go. And as teachers, we do that every day, right? We go, well, here's my lesson plan, and I guess we're gonna see what happens, and that's exactly what's gonna happen here today. So.
Good.
Okay.
All right. Anything else?
No, I think we covered it. All right, we're going to get started. Are you going to be a student as
I
well?
will sit over there, you bet.
Okay, so for this part, when I enact my lesson, I'm going to ask you to take your teacher hats off and then put student hats on. So I'm going to enact this lesson as if you are my high school student. So, oh, you got me set up. Thank you. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is go back to your quick writing space. And if you need another piece of paper, I've got plenty here. So we need a fresh one.
give you, this is going to be a quick write. I'm going to give you no more than a minute, 1 minute. You have an image up on the screen. I want you to use that image as an inspiration to write about it. What is it? Anything that you want to write about as far as that object is on the screen. There is no right or wrong. It can be a list. It can be sentences. It doesn't matter. 1 minute. Ready? Go. You have about 30 seconds. Halfway through. About 10 seconds. Those final thoughts on your paper. What else you can say about that image? Stop there. So what I'm going to ask you to do is very similar to how we did the quick write earlier, which is to turn to a partner. You want to do a group 3, or is that okay?
Yeah.
All right. So, and again, no apologies, no explanations, no embellishments. You can read just exactly what is on your page to your partner, and then switch roles. Can I say anything more about that? No? Okay. Right. Go. Why don't you 3 go, and then you 2 come back. Okay.
Mine's just kind of a list of things. Professionals over here, crash, layers, growing.
I wrote scales like a fish or playground, or thistle, green, hard, dip, tasty. I don't know how to prepare.
Usually take a little bit of weight on,
Best
but
part inside.
it's delicious.
Outside. Many stairs inside. It's different.
Get
Tedious
from
patience
one
is required to get to the inside of the mechanism.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys had an opportunity, and did you guys both have an opportunity to read? Okay, so since we're such a small group, I'm just going to ask you to throw a few things out there. Like, what are some things that you heard, or what's something that you said? I was kind of eavesdropping without trying to hover over you too much, but yes, you asked a few questions. Would
Yeah.
you mind sharing one of your questions for us?
I said delicious, but how do I cut it?
How do I cut it right?
And then are they good for you? I don't even know what vitamins are in there. Because
Right.
it's not a green leafy really, but anyway. And then how much do you get from one of them? Because I usually buy them in the jar, 'cause I'm lazy. So I don't know like how many pieces you would actually get from one.
Right. Interesting. Okay, good. What else did you hear or say?
I heard messy and layers. Culture was an interesting word.
Yeah, I overheard culture too. Can I ask you to say a little bit
Well,
more
just
about
like, you know, you think of artichokes and you think like a Mediterranean usually, it usually goes with a specific type of flavor profile,
Mhm.
which is usually very close to a culture.
that? Interesting. So do we all recognize that this is an artichoke? Right? Okay, good, because that's the first time that's happened.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just jump out of this lesson real quick. When I do this with my students, I actually have the artichokes on the tables when they walk in, and then they interact with them. When they do the quick write, there some more things come out because it's a lot more sensory. But since we're traveling, we didn't grab any artichokes on the way up. So anyway, anything else that you heard or wanted to surface about that? Go ahead,
It's
Brenda.
very interesting. Her perspective was one like, I'm not sure what this thing is. Whereas my perspective, because I'm a foodie, I knew exactly what it was.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I was saying is it has a lot of layers, and there's material in the layers, so don't just throw it away on your way to the heart. I think sometimes in lessons that we throw in an effort to get to the main point, the heart of it all.
Mhm.
We throw away anything that we can't use because we don't have time. And a lot of times, the learning is in the parts before you get to the heart of it.
That's very interesting. So you use this image to kind of create your own metaphor for life experiences, right? Like ripping something apart to get to the heart of the matter and thinking that we don't need, because we don't have time, that we don't need those layers and that they're valuable. The process is valuable as well.
I guess I had
That's
the teacher
awesome.
hat on too long.
That's all right. That's all right.
Because
That's
that's exactly
perfect.
the thing that I thought about. I said, you know, having eaten an artichoke and gone through all of those layers, it can be a lot of fun.
Right.
You know, but everybody prizes the heart of the artichoke. It's like all the rest of this stuff is really just junk. And I think sometimes, because I've thought about like your 5 steps, which we talked about in the lesson, all of these things need to happen
Mhm.
so that I can get the thing I really want to have.
At the very end, right. Good. It's tough work to work with an artichoke, isn't it? You gotta work for it.
You can't be in a hurry, that's the trick.
You can't be in a hurry, exactly. Okay, so that's gonna segue us into the next part, which in your packet of materials that you found on your table, you should have a poem. You'll notice that it's a bilingual poem. As Jeff mentioned earlier, I am a Spanish teacher, so this happens in my classroom is in Spanish. So what I'm gonna ask you to do, we're gonna read through the poem. I'm going to read it out loud with you. I'm going to read it in Spanish because that's what I do. However, it is a bilingual edition, so, and you will follow along. It's very simple line by line to follow along in English. So you can kind of keep both eyes on those. Now, as you read and listen, I'm going to ask you to do one other task, and that is to have your pencil or your pen handy in your hand and underline or circle any language as you see it or hear it that interests you, strikes you as poignant, or stands out to you. And just a very simple underline, okay? All right, so like I said, I'm gonna read it in Spanish, but you can follow along in either language. So, Oda a la alcachofa. La alcachofa de tierno corazón se vistió de guerrero. Erecta, construyó una pequeña cúpula. Se mantuvo impermeable bajo sus escamas. A su lado, los vegetales locos se encresparon. Se hicieron zarcillos, espadañas, bulbos conmovedores. En el subsuelo durmió la zanahoria de bigotes rojos. La viña resecó los sarmientos por donde sube el vino. La col se dedicó a probarse faldas. El orégano a perfumar el mundo. Y la dulce alcachofa allí en el huerto, vestida de guerrero, bruñida como una granada, orgullosa. Y un día, una con otra en grandes cestos de mimbre, caminó por el mercado a realizar su sueño, la milicia. En hileras nunca fue tan marcial como en la feria. Los hombres entre las legumbres con sus camisas blancas eran mariscales de las alcachofas. Las filas apretadas, las voces de comando y la detonación de una caja que caía. Pero entonces viene María con su cesto, escoge una alcachofa, no le teme, la examina, la observa contra la luz como si fuera un huevo, la compra, la confunde en su bolsa con un par de zapatos, con un repollo y una botella de vinagre, hasta que entrando a la cocina la sumerge en la olla. Así termina en paz esta carrera de vegetal armado que se llama alcachofa. Luego, escama por escama, desvestimos la delicia y comemos la pacífica pasta de su corazón verde. Okay, so I like to read that in Spanish out loud just so you can hear the intended rhythm from the poet. The poet is Pablo Neruda. I don't know if you're familiar with Neruda's works. He's very famous for his odes. So what I'm going to ask you to do now, and there is no systemic formula to this, so it's going to be kind of random. I'm going to ask you to read out loud in whatever particular order that you want to, the word or words that you've underlined. So it can just be one at a time or a few words at a time. I'm not going to call on you. You can just kind of shout them out as you see fit. Okay? All right, Jeff, do you want to get us started?
Sure.
Okay. And you can just jump in anytime after him.
The army military, marshal's ranks command.
Boring. Crazy. Furnished.
Astonishing techniques.
Bristle.
Peace, armored, vegetable,
Perfuming the world.
Peaceful flesh. Afraid.
impermeable,
Undress.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you there, okay? So with 5 people, that was very, very nice. Okay, so what I'm gonna ask you now is what did you notice about that? What did you hear? What was that like to engage with the text that way?
The underlining or the calling out?
The calling out. Or the underlining, you could talk about that too. What did you notice about that process?
I noticed things in the poem that I didn't the first time when I heard that read, and it even influenced the words I read later. Like oh yeah, that like they when I heard. I should give a specific example. So I think someone said warrior maybe,
Oh, yeah.
and then that triggered other language that I hadn't noticed before.
Okay.
It made me make more connections with the text because I, heard them say multiples like armored, army things, and like, oh, it really did reference those a lot, and it made me make a connection that it was frequent in the poem.
Oh, interesting. What else did you notice? One observation I had just from standing in the background listening to you all is it's almost like, well, what does it mean to render, right? I mean, that's what essentially we did. You rip apart a text, you make something new with it, and as you were calling things out, you were taking the words that were already on the page, but creating something new. It's almost like you created your own poem about the artichoke or anything, whatever else you wanted it to be. It's one thing that I observed from the teacher's standpoint.
Yeah, well, listening to you say that, I heard that too. There was even, performance is too much, but there was the way we read it was affected me. Like we, I don't know how to say it. We weren't just reciting the language. There was we tried to connect to each other. And I don't know if that makes sense, but I
Well,
heard the rhythm of the, yeah.
Let me ask
yeah.
you guys this. Did you read your words in order?
No.
No. So how did you decide what to say next? You went on a feeling.
Yeah.
I mean, it's what I think
Yeah,
you're trying to
that's what
say
I'm
was
saying, yeah.
you had to listen to what Christina said, and then you're like, ooh, that word that I underlined would work here, right? And so it's an on-the-fly creation that makes you be very present with the text. So, okay, perfect. Now the next thing I'm going to ask you to do is put your poem to the side and go back to your quick write paper. And I'm only going to give you 30 seconds. And what I want you to do is I want you to answer this question: what about that text makes it a poem? How do you know it's a poem? If we put it next to a novel, what would make it a poem and not a novel? So, real quick, 30 seconds. You have about 10 seconds. Okay, I'm going to ask you to put that thought to a close, bring that thought to a close. And instead of pairing, we can just do this all together as one group. So Lee, I'm going to ask you to start. If you would go ahead and tell me what makes this a poem?
One thing.
Whatever you got.
So I said, like, the sentences are not complete, the structure is different, there's alliteration and rhythm and meter, the length.
Okay, so I'm hearing line, okay, and rhythm. Okay, those are a few things that you said, right? Okay, what else?
building a visual,
Say that again?
building a visual.
How? Like how did
Short
the
little
poet do that?
phrases, short little phrases.
Okay, so line length. Okay, was there anything else that the poet does to help build a visual?
Give some examples.
that one just because I need to. So, and you don't have, I mean, we don't
No,
have to
it's
make
fine.
this Christina, you know, if you know what Christina's saying and you want to help her out with where does the poet do that? Where does he make a comparison?
Dressed as a warrior.
All right, so he's dressed as a warrior, right? And so what is that whenever writers use language in such a way to help us understand it, okay, that's that use of figurative language. When we talk about something that's like something else, what do we call that? Okay, metaphor and simile, right? Okay, and that's what makes this a poem. That's how we know that is. You know, when we look at it without even reading the words, we can tell immediately. You guys said line length, right? You know if it's not a short story that I'm asking you to read, right? We can tell by looking at it. But then when we start reading, that word choice makes, and the use of figurative language then makes it a poem as well. So I'm particularly interested in that idea of figurative language, in that idea of metaphor, where Neruda says that the artichoke gets dressed as a warrior, and it's really reminiscent to what Brenda was talking about earlier, how you really have to peel back and to get at the heart of the artichoke, and that's very good imagery that she even started off, and I swear I didn't plant that in her brain, but it was perfect, Brenda, thank you. So that's going to segue us into this video clip that I have here. We're going to watch just a few minutes of the movie Il Postino, and
Oh, I love this.
you do? Okay, good, great. Yeah, I know, I'm a huge fan of this movie too, so anyway, I cry every time I watch it, and I've probably seen it 20 times, but there will be no tears. This is a really good part. This is a part where we have two men here. The man on the right-hand side is Pablo Neruda. Not in real life, it's an actor playing the author of this poem, Pablo Neruda. To the left is Mario. And what we have here is we're gonna eavesdrop on a conversation between Mario and Neruda about what metaphor is and how those two are trying to figure that out and how they use metaphor to make sense of the world. So we don't have speakers. We have speakers, but they're very, very faint. Luckily, it's subtitled. It is in Italian, but it's subtitled in English, so even if you can't hear that well, you can read along. All right, Jeff, if you could play for me, please. emotion, right? Okay, because he's listening to Naruto, you know, and it's interesting that part. And I've seen that I don't know how many times, but I think maybe because the sound was turned down this time, but I had to strain to really listen, even though I don't speak Italian, but I'm still straining to listen. And I thought about the question, how do we know it's a poem, right? And it's because of that rhythm and because of that way that he makes Mario feel. And Mario names that, right? And he uses metaphor to do so. I mean, what is this metaphor that he uses? He feels like what? A boat tossing around on his words, right? So we see Mario pretty effortlessly, right? He says, I didn't even count because I didn't mean to. And we see Mario effortlessly make this metaphor to describe his feelings. So that's one thing that metaphor can do for us, is to describe the way it would feel, as well as what Naruto does with his metaphor whenever he dresses his artichoke as a warrior, right? What does that do? I don't know if that evokes a particular emotion, but it personifies, you know, a vegetable that we've either worked with or we know that we've eaten, right? Or bought in a jar. Either way, those are considered that way. So now we've seen metaphor being used in a few ways today. So what I'm going to ask you to do, what you've probably noticed is on your table, you have, well, there's two different. I should have thought better. There's two different colors of purple. There's a light color purple. So everyone will need one of those. That's a blank sheet of paper, and it's supposed to be. And then you'll see a darker sheet of purple paper. And you want to grab one of those, as well as one of those household common objects that are in the middle of the table. And if you want something else, I have others. And what you're going to do,
Predictable and take the guitar pick.
does everybody have one, or do you want some more inspiration here? So what I'm going to ask you to do is, you have an abstract concept on a dark purple piece of paper, and you have an everyday object. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is use those two items to serve as an inspiration to create your own metaphor. So you can use them to mesh the two together, you can use metaphor or you can use them just as an inspiration. There really are no rules here, okay? I'm going to purposely constrain your time because I don't want you to overthink it. Don't worry about if it's right, don't worry about if it's good, if that's such a thing. Don't worry about that I'm gonna ask you to kind of just let those things go. I'm gonna give you just a few minutes, I'm gonna give you 2 minutes, I'm gonna check in with you to write, okay, and create a metaphor. And I want you to put that on your light piece of paper, the light purple piece of paper. I would like you to add your metaphor to that. Ready, set, go. If you want to swap out your, you know, you need something else. You have another minute. It's okay. I'm pushing you purposely, like you know, I stretch this out a little bit more, but because of time, I have to to go, okay, ready, set, go, right. so, so. Okay, so what I'm going to ask you to do now, and this won't take very long, and then we'll move on. So I'm going to ask you to kind of do a real quick curation of your space. So take your whatever writing that you created, and somehow put your objects and your word kind of next to it, and kind of make a little space. You know, we have 3 things, just kind of so we can see what your word is, we can see what your object is, and then we can put your writing with it. You're going to leave that at your space. So if you want to take a look, Jeff's done it perfectly. You've done this before, Jeff. And I'm going to ask you to do a gallery walk. Okay, gallery walk, we do these in our classrooms quite a bit, where we get up and walk around and make noticings and whatnot. Since we're just a small group, that'll just look like a big circle right around the table. And read what your friends have done. Suspend judgment, right? Because we certainly have asked you to put yourselves out there. So go ahead and you guys can just go around this way.
Scribbles.
This is what you can do in 2 minutes.
Yeah,
No, in this room.
cowards.
All right, great. Thank you so much. I know that that's really asking you to kind of put yourselves out there and have somebody else read your work, and that's a little bit of a vulnerable position. So I appreciate you playing along. So do you want me to go into noticings about that real quick before? Do we need time to?
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Yeah, it's okay if I do.
Oh,
Or
I
do
was
you
gonna say we'll move to debrief.
Okay, yeah. Usually, okay. So normally, what we would do is kind of then do a quick like, what did you notice? What and we can kind of honor the work that we've done here. But we're running a little bit short on time, so I'm going to end scene on that on my lesson, and then we will move to the debrief. Right? So you want to guide them through that part?
So there's another handout that says 3x2 in big bold letters along the left-hand side. If you could find that, looks like. Yeah,
Where am I?
Very good. And in the upper left-hand box, what I'd like you to do is to jot down 3 things that you noticed about Leslie's lesson. I'm going to give you a little bit of help here. The first challenge here is to suspend judgment. So when you catch yourself saying things like that was good when, or that was bad when, or that was interesting when, those are assessments, right, evaluations. Quite literally, what did you notice? And you can even use that language. I noticed purple paper on the tables when we came in. Or it might be something you heard someone say. I heard Leslie say, blah, blah, blah. Right? And we'll go through this fairly quickly. And if you don't get 3, you don't get 3. There's nothing special about that number. 3 things you noticed. Seconds maybe to finish that observation. Again, there's nothing magic about 3, but shoot for 3. One thing that we want to make clear, and we'll say this again before we take off, is that what you just experienced from the moment that Leslie and I sat in this chair to right now happens in our school in a PLC meeting twice a month. Every other Tuesday morning in my classroom, another teacher's classroom, a lead teacher and a thinking partner will enact a lesson. So this is exactly what happens. What you just did is what happens in those PLC meetings. And part of the protocol that we shared with you, and part of the protocol in general, is honoring that lead teacher. So it very much matters to Leslie what you notice, and that's valuable feedback for that lead teacher. It's also important, though, to let that person have the first word, right? So we're going to hear from Leslie first in a debrief conversation that's going to be facilitated by me as your thinking partner. In that middle box, you see a space that says notes from debrief. It's our hope that we say something here that's noteworthy or interesting. Again, don't feel like you have to capture everything, but there is space there for you to take notes on our conversation. So that's where we are. Almost done, right? Good?
Yeah.
All right. So you had said at the beginning that you wanted to explore figurative language, particularly metaphor, and that you pedagogically you were going to use some big moves of text rendering and writing to learn. Right? What did you notice about that? How did that go?
Well, I'm happy with the lesson. I mean, there's always a few things that I would want to go differently. The first thing that I know now that I've enacted that rendering the text in the way that we did today, because I've never done that. I am happy with that. I like it.
So let me ask you this, yeah, because you said that twice. You said you're happy with the lesson, specifically you're happy with rendering the text. What did you notice that gave you that feeling? How do you know you're happy about it? What happened?
You weren't gonna let me get away with just
No.
I'm happy with it, are you? Okay, so so why do I like it? It's much more interactive. It breathes life into that text. And then the fact that they created their own poem. Performance art right there, and just by using someone else's words, something new came out of it. So that is the definition of rendering, right? To make something new out of it, to you know, tear it apart and mix it up and put it back together again. And I really also liked the fact that you said I had to pay attention to what someone else was doing. So then therefore that's proof that my students are listening to each other.
So two big pieces that I'm hearing you say. One is the results, the things that we wrote. You thought they were good. You were happy with those, and you're attributing that, among other things, the fact that we rendered the text. Also, you heard when we were rendering the text and kind of debriefing that in the moment. You heard me say that in order for me to play along, I had to listen to what other people were saying and find a way to enter it. So when you heard me say that, your teacher brain went, ooh, that's kind of cool, I like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and if I can add to that, as far as the writing is concerned, as I was reading, I'm very, you know, there was a lot of, we were worried and nobody wanted to share and get up and walk around. But, you know, what I saw was very impressive, and I feel like that's where I had to kind of shortchange this lesson, is I did virtually nothing specific on how to write a metaphor, other than we read and we listened, but
Right.
I never taught this is how to write a metaphor, and then this figurative language was surfaced.
Right, not unlike the way Mario made one, right?
Exactly. And so
Verbs,
that's kind of proof there that I don't need to directly teach everything.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Well, and I want to say too, though, it didn't happen by magic, though, or it didn't happen because we're all so great. You guided us in very, because, and to continue the debrief, in very intentional ways.
Right.
You started out by saying, I want to do this, this, and this,
Yes.
so that they can do this.
Yes.
Right?
And yes. And I think that video clip helps too,
Yeah.
and that's why it's there. And I've tweaked that over time too,
Right.
is why that's it, because it poises us to write without me having to say, this is how you write these are the parts of a metaphor. We don't need to do that, right? And some great things came out of it.
To wrap up, and in the name of time, you had said once it's enacted that you wanted us to have a deeper understanding of metaphor. And again, I think we could argue that those things that we wrote demonstrate that we do that pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
We all have some new writing, and I've heard people use the language teacher has thinking about this. That was what you had said you wanted us to take away.
Mm-hmm.
Really quickly, 20 words or less. What do you think?
Thanks.
What do you think you're taking away from having led this?
That I like text rendering that way. I think that reading it out loud by me makes it active for the students,
Yeah.
and they are forced to engage simply by underlining.
Nice, very good, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Again, our hope here is that our conversation maybe triggered a memory from the lesson, like, oh yeah, I remember that now. And so you have space in the third box to get as many as 3 if you could think of it, 3 other things you noticed about the metaphor lesson. And we're gonna go really fast here because I know we're down to minutes left. I'm gonna expedite just a couple things.
We got started 2 minutes.
Well, I know, but they're hungry and they're meeting people at some fancy restaurant. No. I wonder, as you're, give you 10 or 15 seconds to finish that, just a real quick one lap around, share one thing that you've written in those top boxes, anywhere across, left box, middle box, right box, just so that Leslie can hear some of what you, because even though this was a small and kind of intimate group, you all noticed and experienced things that she wouldn't be able to as the teacher, and so this is valuable feedback for her. So one just quick whip around, something that you noticed.
Despite the inherent risk-taking that we were forced to make, I noticed the suspension of judgment from you.
Nice, and can you, where did you notice that?
Just in her comments of, you're not gonna be wrong, there's this, it's a safe environment.
There you go, nice. Continue around.
Intentional linking.
Intentional
This led
linking.
to this, so that I'm assuming for the rest of the teachers, we knew that what you observed and what we observed were all her intent.
I hear you using the word intentional and linking. It's a very, not to name drop here, it's a very Vygotskian principle of consequential. Yeah. No, it's consequential progressions. I did this so that I could do this so that I could do this. Yes.
I noticed that Leslie said during the debrief, saying that they created something from somebody else's words. And I really like that because I knew that the lesson would contain metaphors and writing, but I like that you said that it was created from something else rather than just creating from nothing. And I like that was kind of.
Yeah, that's pretty good. One more.
I was stuck with 2 ideas.
That's all right.
So I'm gonna give you both. One was that we created a deeper understanding of metaphor without actually defining the word. I thought that was very important because I teach first grade. And sometimes the definition just sinks to kids, but if you can find a way to teach them what they need to know without actually ever using the real word, you've done a really powerful thing. The other thing was, for me, confirmation. In the reflection that text rendering is a powerful tool. And you said you knew it was, and then when you saw the response of the student, it just made it even more certain.
I want to share, thank you. Thank all of you. I want to share just real quickly and then get you out of here some of what we've learned from doing this. So as I said, teachers at Alton High from across disciplines, from across grade levels. We've got elementary school teachers that come. Leslie's a Spanish teacher, we have math teachers. This is just an agenda, you don't need to read that. Administrators, downtown board office administrators, and they don't come just to take attendance. They sit down and they write metaphors. It's so great. All right, so each imp generates data. It generates writing. You all wrote something. It generates so this is from an imp that another teacher did where we made sketches and we wrote stuff. So just like you all wrote poems, it generates some work. We collect all of these 3x2 debriefing sheets and look at teacher language so that we can make an argument for how teachers are growing over time by regularly engaging in an inquiry into our practice. Teachers will, so you've seen that, teachers afterwards, whenever, and here's the other thing, it's not always me or Leslie leading. We work real hard at recruiting other people to say, oh, you've got this really great lesson, will you come and do it? And so we have different people, thank you, excellent, thank you. We have different people facilitating as thinking partners. We have different people acting as lead teachers. And after they're done, I'll go to Leslie and say, hey, while it's still fresh in your mind, send me a quick email. What was that like for you leading that? So I've got all of these emails from people who have engaged this. And I do a lot of domain analysis and sifting through all that language to see what I can see. And I want to show you just a couple of pieces of that. So we started doing this work 4 years ago, I think we decided. And this is from an IMP from 4 years ago, brand new people experiencing these for the first time. And you recognize this paper. What I want you to see here is just what we had talked about at the beginning. The things that people notice are not really noticing. I noticed people took the activity seriously. That begs the question, how do you know that? How do you know they took it seriously? People were engaged. How do you know that? What did that look like, right?
Those are judgments.
Right. And here's another one. I noticed people enjoyed my clock. The lesson involved people bringing things and writing about them. Well, again, how do you know that people enjoyed it? How do you know people were insightful? Okay, so fast forward a whole year of doing this twice a month together, right? And here's what happened. The sheet looks a little bit different, but the questions are the same. I led an IMP on informational text. That's a common core shift. We're hearing a lot about it, right? So I led a lesson with my colleagues about how I'm going to teach informational text to my students. And we did just like the whole thing, just like you just did. And then when it was done, I said, all right, next Tuesday, my seniors are going to do this. And I invited that whole room of teachers to come into my classroom when I did that. They all didn't come, but 3 or 4 people did, right? So those, and this is at the end of the year, after a whole year of doing this particular kind of PLC. Those teachers came into my room when I did this lesson with students. And what's really striking to me is, and I'll zoom in here for you if I can. Maybe it isn't gonna let me. A couple of things. The quality of noticings is much different. Invited students to contribute thoughts of the lesson. Brought us back to whole group by asking a representative from each table to share their quotes. These are very specific observations. This teacher is much better at noticing classroom practice now. And I want to argue that that's because they've gotten regular practice at it over time, right? They're not just saying, oh, that was cool, oh, I felt good. They're saying, oh, here's what I saw. And not only that, but now the quality of questions that teachers are asking themselves about practice are much more interesting.
Do you want me to pull it? It's what
Is
you're
it down
talking
at the
about
bottom?
is down
Yeah,
at the bottom, yeah.
So as a result of being able to notice practice much better, this teacher's asking much more interesting questions. What were the literary practices the students did before today's lesson? Here's a teacher recognizing that these kids were doing stuff, not just because they were honors kids or not just because they had a great teacher, but clearly something happened to get them to this point. And here's a teacher trying to figure out what that is. How can I make that happen in my own space, right? So if we go back to what we talked about at the beginning, intentional collaboration and reflection, which is what I want to argue the thinking partner thing does, and these reflective sheets that you just filled out. Attending to disciplinary practice. Geez, how am I going to teach metaphor? I'm going to render the text, I'm going to do this, and then reflecting on that process allows teachers to grow into their practice, and we've got enough data collected that we can make that argument in a lot of ways. We also are starting to be able to argue how that's affecting student work. One of our social studies teachers came to the Lit Lab regularly, took a lesson that he saw, appropriated it for a history class, and he stopped me in the hall with a couple days afterwards with a stack of papers that his kids he had done something around September 11th, I think, or whatever it was, and he had a stack of things that the kids had written, and he's excited. He's pulling them out. He says, "Hey, look at this! Look at this! This kid never says anything in class. This kid can barely put 2 sentences together, and he's written 2 whole pages, right?" And again, at least anecdotally, what his kids are able to do in the classroom is very different because of his regular practice and inquiring into his practice. So again, I don't mean to be too didactic about it, but we're wrapping up, and that's the cool part of the work that we're doing. Last thing, and then I'll open it to questions, certainly give our lead teacher the final word. University of Missouri St. Louis, ourcolab.org. You can learn more about this. If you want help starting, we call it an Edo Lab, an innovation lab. There's support for that if you wanted us or UMSL to come and help you get started on one, or if you have more questions about it, we're certainly able to do that. I think that's all I have to say.
Yeah, I think.
Thank you so much
Yes.
for hanging out with us.
Thank you. Thanks for being students and teachers at the same
That was
time.
fun.
Good. It's kind of fun to take your teacher hat off for a while, isn't it? And kind of just be like,
You should like do readings in Spanish
Oh,
for
is
like
it?
fit books on tape because.
Oh, I messed up a few times.
Well, yeah, but other than that, it was like so fluid. I was like, oh, I just.
Well, I've read
I
that.
got distracted. I wasn't underlining things because I was like listening to you.
Well, I've read that poem a few times.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's gorgeous too.
But I noticed whenever I was doing it, like when I got to the third page, I kind of like my fingers were like I had better fingers and I couldn't get to the third page, and I'm like, how do I not know the next line? Like I've read this so many times. Like I know it's zapatos, I know there's shoes in there somewhere, but thank you for saying that. It's very kind of you. I appreciate that.
So does just the high school engage in this?